Now, it's a beautiful day in Moscow, and today I have a very, very special guest indeed. Today, we're looking at the GAZ-13 Chaika. Now, reminiscent of the American counterparts, this model was actually, well, the whole Chaika range was actually the GAZ-13 Chaika range, was produced between 1961 and 1981. Only 3,179 specimens, examples ever rolled out of the Gorky Automobile Plant. And this one that I have here, the convertible, the cabriolet, is particularly special because there are only 10 left around the world. Now, you had other variations. You had the estate or the station wagon, which was used as a hearse or in an ambulance. You had the limousine version, you had the sedan version, and of course you had this wonderful cabriolet. Now, under the bonnet sits a 5.5 liter V8 producing 195 brake horsepower with a top speed of 160 kilometers an hour. Now, the Russian, or rather the Soviet public, couldn't really buy these cars because they were manufactured exclusively for the Soviet government officials. However, back in the Soviet days, they could hire them for special occasions such as weddings. These days, they are at the hands of collectors, and the gentleman today has lent it to us for a few hours to do a thorough review. Now, this particular era of car is of particular interest to me, and I'll tell you why. But before that, I'm going to get inside and tell you from the wonderful comfort of this luxurious GAZ-13 Chaika. Now, back in 1955, my great-grandfather at the time traveled to New York to visit my great-grand-uncle, who happened to be the UN's permanent secretary, Turkey's UN permanent secretary in New York.
Is His Excellency Ambassador Selim Safer, head of the Turkish delegation to the United Nations.
And upon his trip, he went into a Buick showroom and purchased a 1955 Buick Roadmaster. Now, that car survived till my early days into the early 1990s. I think it was about 1993 that we had to get rid of it. And I have very fond memories as a child being driven in that car. And this magnificence, this kind of grandiosity of this Chaika reminds me of that Buick. The fact that it's a bit of a drop head, I believe that they're called, the fact that it's a convertible, the fact that it's so large and luxurious, just kind of brings me back those fond memories. Unfortunately, we had to sell the car around 1993 because we had a kind of a reverse gear problem, but here we are. What a pleasure it is, what an honor it is, and what a privilege it is for me to be here and filming this GAZ-13 Chaika in Moscow. Well, here I want to take a beat and speak a little bit more about Selim Safer, an extraordinary career diplomat. He served as Turkey's ambassador to Moscow during the final years of World War II and the early days of the Cold War. He is credited for successfully navigating through some of the toughest diplomatic negotiations between the Soviet Union and Turkey, while Vyacheslav Molotov served as the foreign minister of the Soviet Union. Now, Selim Safer himself, after serving numerous years as a diplomat, becomes Turkey's foreign minister in 1960. Now, enough nostalgia. Let's get to the interior of the GAZ-13. Now, as you can see, this is kind of like a mini living room. It's a massive space. Now, over here, you can kind of sit, very comfortable. Two people can kind of sit, and you've got more space here, perhaps, than your modern Maybach. However, let's say you're four, you've got a very clever contraption here. You pull this forward, and then voila, you suddenly have another row of seats in front, so you can have 2, 4, 6 people comfortably here. You can even have 3, 6, and 7, 8 people also sitting here. I mean, the vast kind of space that you have here is wonderful. The materials are particularly beautifully done. They've been preserved in their, original fashion. We put that there. They've put a kind of a carpet here. Of course, this is an extra. This doesn't come like this, but you can see how it was with the beige carpets on the floor. The fine details over here. You've even got electric windows. Of course, the car has to be turned on. But you've actually got electric windows here. They might be hydraulic windows, but they are. And of course, the top, the cabriolet, it's also a hydraulic top. Now, once you get inside, it is very reminiscent of the American cousins, let's say, from across the Pacific, whether you're inside or outside. You can see that it really reminds you of those wonderful Buicks and Cadillacs of the 1950s. As a matter of fact, this one, the Chaika GAZ-13, was more similar, they say, to the Packards of the 1950s. Now, for me, they look wonderful, very, very kind of large, comfortable. You've got this old school radio in the middle. You've got a very nice kind of steering wheel. This particular model is a manual that you can see right here. But of course, you could also get them in an automatic. That's what I think anyway, but you know, we'll correct that if we need to. In terms of what the interior looks like, you've got these massive bench seats that 3 would be comfortable, 4 would be a crowd, but I think only 2 are kind of meant to sit here. You've got the analog gauges right in front of you, an oversized steering wheel, which looks rather good. The visibility from this rather small mirror is also good. You've got a side mirror here and another one there because they're such grand, such large cars. You need one over there. But just the details, how well it's been preserved. It is a wonderful, wonderful car. Let's not forget, this particular one is from 1962. So first of all, thank you very much indeed for having us today. It's a real privilege to be in this wonderful car. I guess I want to ask you, how did you acquire it? What's so special behind it? And tell us a little bit of the story of the GAZ-13 Chaika.
История началась не с этой машины, а с тоже редкая машина, ГАЗ-14, санитарная версия. И меня попросили уступить ту машину, потому что она была редкая, осталось, из 5 машин осталась только одна, и предложили вместо санитарной Чайки вот этот открытый кабриолет.
Okay, and when you got it, what kind of state was it in? Did you have to do a lot of repairs? What kind of work hours did you have to put into this? What did you change? You know, what kind of fixing did you have to do?
Особо чинить ничего не надо было. Надо было немножко дополнить, чего не хватало. Приемник вот не был, часов не было, ну и так по мелочам еще.
And what is it that you love most about this car? What is it that draws this car to you?
Ну, меня прежде всего впечатляет то, что это кабриолет. У машины, у которой мягкий верх, он снимается, ставится. Это очень редкая версия машин вообще этой марки, и в частности, вообще кабриолеты у нас редкие машины.
And I think you said there are only 10 surviving of this car, is that right?
10 было произведено, 10-12, точно нет данных.
I see. And how often do you get to put the top down and enjoy it? How often do you drive this car?
Не очень часто, в основном открытие сезона, закрытие сезона, ну и немножко, если погода хорошая, в течение лета тоже.
But do you drive it in the winter as well? Is it a car that you drive quite often, or is it a special occasion car?
Нет, зимой не езжу.
And you know, as we drive down the streets in Moscow, I'm seeing a lot of people taking pictures, waving at you, kind of really appreciating this car. So that must be a real pleasure to have. Are there people trying to buy this from you?
Ну, наверное, есть, но мне неизвестно об этом.
I see. And you have some other cars in your collection, is that right?
Yes.
And so what are some of them?
Limo version.
Limo version?
Yes,
Okay.
2 cars.
2 cars?
And
so
one of them is served for our aviation constructional Sukhoi.
Uh-huh. And do you have any, so one of them was for the aircraft fighters, do you have any historical data about this car, who it first belonged to, how far can you go back to who the original owner was?
Про эту я не очень много знаю. Просто тот человек, у которого я менял, он говорил, что она из Болгарии.
Bulgaria, right. So it must have been maybe gifted to, because I read that these were given to Russian ambassadors and generals and so on that were abroad, all across the Soviet Union.
Ministers.
Ministers, of course, yeah, ministers. So whether internal or external, yeah, this is very interesting. Yeah, and yeah, well, that's great. Anything you want to add? Anything you have in mind that?
Когда я жил в Советском Союзе, я никогда не мог даже представить, что я буду иметь 4 таких чайки и еще 2 14-х.
Absolutely, it's a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity, yeah. And is it true that in the Soviet Union, private citizens couldn't buy this? It was only for government officials.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, I'd like to thank you. It's you know, I've not only gone back to my childhood because we used to own something similar, a Buick from 1956, but also I've managed to kind of, you know, go down memory lane in Soviet history and experience that. So thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
Wonderful.